And the US president has hinted he'll make another run for the White House in 4 years if he fails to overturn this year's election result. Donald Trump addressed colleagues, friends and family at a holiday reception on Tuesday night, telling them, "I'll see you in 4 years." A video circulated on social media also showed President Trump repeating unproven election fraud claims.
But it's been an amazing 4 years. We're trying to do another 4 years. Otherwise, I'll see you in 4 years.
Joining me now is United States Studies Centre Chief Executive Simon Jackman. Simon, I feel as though we keep saying this, but as well, this time it was Donald Trump inching again, perhaps getting the closest yet again to conceding. Is that how you took this and the writing well and truly on the wall now?
Yeah. There's more and more lines from the president himself, but in particular from Republican colleagues. And I think the most significant moment over the last few days, Tom, was Attorney General Barr saying that the Justice Department has found no evidence of fraud, at least nothing remotely close to that needed to overturn the result. It's all over, and the electors will meet. We're only about 10 days away from that, and that will be, I think, another really important step towards legal, formal, constitutional validation of the result.
I'm going to go down a bit of a cul-de-sac here. We've got more results coming in Georgia, so the recounts as expected, they change things a handful of votes either way.
That's right.
More interesting perhaps, Joe Jorgensen, Libertarian. So, you assume a lot more Republican voters. 60,000 votes in Georgia, the margin there, 17,000. In Arizona, she got 50,000 votes, the margin was 11,000. In Wisconsin, 20,000 votes was the margin, 38,000 her votes. This is probably the person that had the biggest, almost non-spoken impact on the electoral college here.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Tom, and American political history is replete with instances like this. Ask Democrats how they feel about Ralph Nader after 2000. Ask Republicans how they feel about Ross Perot after 1992. And indeed, back in 2016, was it Jill Stein that cost Hillary Clinton the presidency. So makes you wonder, some states, and we'll get to this in a moment, I think, when we talk about the Georgia runoffs, but, a few jurisdictions in America, Maine has the Australian system of preferential voting. So if you don't get above 50 on first preferences, they go to a preferential system in Maine. And it's a fascinating exercise, Tom, isn't it, to think through how the election results might look different if those minor party voters right across the United States, and indeed some of the states you were referring to, had that option to go one Libertarian, two Trump, as we're used to in Australian elections, preferential voting, how the results might have changed. And indeed, there's a very strong argument that Donald Trump would be president under a system of preferential voting.
Yeah, there is. Look, I suppose it would also boost the stocks of the minor parties because it's seen as such a waste going for them, as was once portrayed in The Simpsons. Anyway, I'm turning back out of that cul-de-sac, looking at Donald Trump and this 4-year sort of claim. If you look at his vote in this election, yes, on the one hand, he's lost by many millions of votes to Joe Biden, but still such a strong turnout. Is he just about assured of the nomination in 4 years, or is it just too far away? Who knows who emerges out of the woodwork? And, he will be 78 by then as well, which, of course, is the new presidential age.
Yeah, look, I think you're... I don't think he'll be able to resist. And, look, we'll get a good look at this over the first few months when he's out of office. I think primarily the monetization of his fame is perhaps option number one. But indeed, that gels and it complements nicely another run at the presidency, even a run at the nomination. The fundraising is just too lucrative, I think, for him to stay away from, to be perfectly blunt about it. Now, I think there's a big sort of opening here for the Republicans. Suppose they surge in the 2022 midterms, and suppose Trump has put him front and center of that surge. He is a turnout machine for Republicans. And I think that's the signal I'll be looking for, thinking ahead already to 2022, how strong a factor, how effective Donald Trump is in the party. The other narrative, Tom, is that the vaccines come online. Biden gets an awful lot of wind in his sails from a public health recovery and an economic recovery. And Trump, particularly these COVID numbers we're seeing in the dying weeks of his presidency, are just heartbreaking. And does the worm turn, as it were, on Donald Trump, or does that, of that 70 mil that voted for him, 71 mil that voted for him, or so, what, 72, 73 mil that voted for him, is there a rusted on 30 mil that are there no matter what, and will sign up for Trump TV or whatever it is, and will be part of his wing of the Republican Party come hell or high water? I think that's what we're waiting to see. And like I said, I think 2022 and his presence in those midterms is in who he supports in primary challenges and the ultimate result in the House of Representatives in particular. I think those will be important straws in the wind of what it might portend for 24.
Your point, I think, is very salient on, the COVID numbers are out of control now. The vaccine looking close. I mean, it's low-hanging fruit for Biden. He doesn't have to do anything to have a huge improvement in the lives of Americans next year. The vaccine will, in one sense, in a huge sense, do that for him. He's going to get a huge boost, it looks like, at the start of his presidency.
Yeah, that's right. And look, when the party of the presidency changes in America, ordinarily, if it weren't Donald Trump and it weren't a very narrow result, at least in the Electoral College, it's American renewal, American rebirth. This is a narrative that we see over the ages when the party of the presidency changes. Now, we're going to an older man, we're going to a 78-year-old. It's not a jumping ahead to a JFK or to a Bill Clinton or to a Barack Obama, a young, charismatic new leader taking America forward and taking a new generation of leaders up the political and establishment food chain, as where it's not that sort of election at all. And indeed, look for the credit claiming wars. Was it Project Warp Speed? Is it the Trump vaccine, the China virus and the Trump vaccine? Look for those narrative games, particularly from Trump and his supporters over those first few months of the Biden presidency as we anticipate the vaccines come online. There'll be an awful lot of elbows out looking to take credit for that. And it's got so much to do with how history judges the Trump legacy as a consequence.
Yeah, and let's be frank. I mean, Biden won't have had to have done anything, but, sometimes you get credit where you shouldn't and blame where you shouldn't. Just wanted to ask you finally about Joe Biden for Australia. His national security advisor come out very strongly in support for Australia in this spat with China. What, if anything, do you think could be key changes in the US-China relationship and how that affects Australia?
Oh, look, I think the key thing is a bit more subtlety in the approach. Scalpel, not sledgehammer. Competition with China, not confrontation with China. Those are the short, shoot-from-the-hip slogans we're getting from Biden himself and some of his writing pre-election, but certainly from the national security team he's building around him. The thing, though, Tom, it's going to take a little while to bed that in. And at least for the time being, I'd say at least to the middle of the year, most likely, of 21, we're in a hole. Biden is not removing the tariffs. It's going to stay hard and tough before it gets easier. And even competition, not confrontation, I think that has a lot of upside for Australia. There'll be plenty of thickening up avenues of cooperation around science and technology and critical materials in particular with the United States. But the mindset of China as a strategic competitor to the United States, and we will say it less forcefully, but to the Western democracies more broadly, that is not going away. I think the mode in which it gets prosecuted will, but it's going to take a little while for that to get bedded down. And so for the next 6 months at least, for allies like Australia and Japan, it remains very much, I'm afraid, game on, and very much us carrying a lot of the water ourselves. The reassuring tweets from Jake Sullivan, very helpful and great indication of where the Biden team's sympathies and where their mindset is. But for practical policy, where we are for the next, I'd say, a good 6, perhaps even 8 months before we see anything significant in terms of policy on this out of the Biden administration.
Yeah, that Sullivan tweet, in fact, talking about the great sacrifices Australia's made, perhaps inadvertently picking up there on Australia's suffering at the moment. We've got to leave it there, Simon Jackman. We appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Always, Tom. Thanks.